Do you like singing hymns in church, or is contemporary praise and worship more to your liking? Or maybe gospel is the only kind of music that really feels like worship to you? Is there a right and wrong kind of music for the church? We're talking about that next on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to the program. Good to have you. Some time ago, Christianity Today had an article in their magazine titled "Ending the Worship War Without a Truce." Well, it's strong terminology, but it does illustrate the tension that can exist in church when philosophies clash about worship music. Helping me to sort through this issue today is Roy Patterson. Roy has been a pastor and a worship leader who has led worship at a variety of churches around the country. Currently, he's the special assistant to Dr. Paul Nyquist, president of Moody Bible Institute, in the area of community relations. Now, Roy has served in numerous roles at Moody, including executive producer and station manager of Moody Radio, and as an on-air host where he continues to be heard on several programs. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about church music.
Okay.
Do you have a background in music? Talk about your background.
I started singing when I was 14. I really didn't know the Lord Jesus before that age, and I knew about the Temptations and the Spinners and some Elton John, things like that. But then I got saved, got involved in the church, and was just fascinated with the ability to not only to sing to God, but to sing to His people and to have people encouraged, inspired, to be filled with hope, even though they were facing some desperate situations. I realized that music was a conduit for the gospel, the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, and thrilled with that. And so I've had the privilege of going to all kinds of churches, Black, white, Latino, Asian, young, old, and I love it. I love the ministry of music and what God can do through it.
When we move into worship,
Sure.
Is it just music? Or what is worship in the church all about?
And what is worship? It's ascribing worth to God. It's giving God glory for who He is and what He's done. Just that simple. Do we have to be in church to do that? I don't think so. I could be ironing my clothes. I could be cutting the grass. I think that worship can happen anywhere at any time. But when the body of Christ comes together for a worship service, I was reading the scripture this morning, Hebrews 10, where it says, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. It's something about the people of God coming together in the assembly of the righteous. I just feel like there's a greater joy, there's a greater peace, a greater assurance. And we call it a worship service. It's actually worship/fellowship, but we're all entering into God's presence. And so I think that's the beauty and also the wonder of worship, because it's not just about giving glory to God for who He is, but God turns around and He blesses us and He gives us peace, joy, and strength for the journey.
Roy, I don't have to tell you that today there's a lot of controversy
Sure.
about music in the church,
Sure.
and especially the worship time
Mm-hmm.
in the music in the church.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been in the church for a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember when you open the hymnal and you sing
Oh, yeah.
3 hymnals, and then the song service ended and you went
Sure.
to the next thing.
Sure.
And you go all the way back to D.L. Moody,
Uh-huh.
Ira Sankey,
Mm-hmm.
when Ira Sankey started syncopated music.
Sure.
Heavily criticized.
Heavily
because-
criticized.
Yeah, because you weren't supposed to use syncopated music in the church.
Right.
You were supposed to do the hymnal thing.
Right.
And so,
Right.
but then we kind of moved beyond that.
Sure.
And then I remember when the first church, I think I heard of a church in New York that was using saxophone, and they were kind of moving to the rhythm a little bit.
Sure.
Well, we always moved to the rhythm in a Pentecostal church, and in the African American
Sure,
church,
sure.
we always moved to the rhythm.
Right.
But I think the difference was it was participatory
That's a good point.
rather than not just concert.
Right.
And today what I'm seeing in the church that I'm concerned about,
Okay.
and not just me,
Okay.
a lot of other people,
Sure.
is that nobody's singing. The music no longer has the kind of rhythm and note structure that you can sing those courses and walk away from church and remember them. And as a result, nobody's singing. It's no longer a congregational participatory worship experience. How do you see worship in the church today, and where do you land on that subject?
What you just described, I hate that. I hate going to a church and I'm just standing there with 100, 200, 1,000 people, and we're all just looking around waiting for that praise band to finish. I don't believe that's what God had in mind when he wanted the body of Christ to come together. What I love is when there's a praise band up front, they've got the words where we can see it, and the song is singable. And that's what I think Martin Luther had in mind when he wrote great songs like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. He wanted to take the great music of the church and put it into the hands of the people. I think that has to happen in church. I'm grateful for people like Chris Tomlin. I'm amazed at what he does. Darlene Check, Jonathan Nelson, William McDowell. It's great music, it's singable, and it causes you to focus on Jesus Christ. I think it is difficult when you're singing a song that's a popular song. It's sung as sort of a solo or special music, and then you expect the congregation to do it. Any good worship leader is going to be considerate of that congregation. There's some songs I can do at my church, at St. Luke, and they'll absolutely know it. If I try to take that song to another church that's really not familiar with it, but I feel like this will give me a great time to shine, and the people, they'll catch up on it, and whether they get it or not, the important thing is that I get to sing it. Well, hold it. A real worship leader is going to say, what's going to suit this congregation? What's going to cause us to focus on Christ? And there are great worship leaders throughout the country. And I know there are worship wars everywhere. I get that. But a good worship leader is going to do what's going to be best for that congregation, whether it's psalms, hymns, or spiritual songs, praise and worship, whatever it might be. Let's make sure the people are actually worshiping and not just gazing at us. That's not cool.
Another example is I've been in churches
Sure.
where the key that the worship leader would hit, nobody in that congregation could hit that key.
Can't sing.
And yet, and part of my struggle with that
Sure.
is that I'm standing in the congregation and I'm looking around and I'm seeing that 80% of the people are not singing.
I know.
And I'm thinking the guy on the platform can also look out
Sure.
and see. So doesn't that matter?
It does matter.
Doesn't that matter?
It does matter.
That it becomes, and especially when you finish a worship song and the congregation applauds. Yeah. I'm thinking, we didn't participate in that. That
Right.
was a performance for us.
Right.
So now we're applauding them.
Right.
How do we get past that, and how do we somehow, because a lot of the worship leaders look at people like me as dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're just wanting us to go back to the old ways and so forth. But someplace in here, Roy, there's got to be a balance.
Well, I think the key is Jesus. People are not coming to see me. I've had the privilege of leading worship throughout the United States and Africa, other places as well. I like to sing. I enjoy singing very, very much. I really enjoy it. But I love to worship with people. That's my favorite thing, and pointing them to Christ. And again, if the worship leader is saying, let's make sure the people of God are entering into the presence of God, if that's not happening, there's a problem. William McDowell said something that I thought was a little crazy and yet is profound. He says, as a worship leader, I need to be invisible. They need to look past me and enter into God's presence. I'm grateful when I go to churches like that, and I've gone to many, many churches where that worship leader is doing just that. I was at a church a couple of months ago in the suburbs of Chicago in LaGrange, and the worship leader was an older guy singing popular praise and worship songs, but he put it in a key that I could sing it in. He made sure that congregation was comfortable.
It's not his key, but it's something that the congregation.
He wanted to make sure that they could sing it, and it was great singing. Some people, and this might be a hot button for some people, they think that it has to be either or. We've got to have either the hymns or we've got to have the praise and worship music. I think you can do both. It all gives glory to God. I believe the hymns, you got to respect them because they're the bridge that brought us to today. But I really want to encourage people, give Chris Tomlin a chance, give Darlene Check a chance. Look at these words, the Gettys, modern hymnologists. I mean, they're writing great music. And I think we can put them together and effectively worship Christ and fellowship together. when people sort of draw a line and say, it's either my way or the highway, I got to ask them, are you seeking God? Are you walking in the Spirit? Are you determined to hold on to something that's only yours as opposed to God's kingdom?
Should churches hire dynamic worship leaders, even if they're not believers? Well, we'll talk about that right after this.
Music is an integral part of worship. It really, really is. I mean, you look throughout the Psalms and what David did and others did throughout that wonderful book. We want to make sure that we're focused on the Lord. At no point do I believe that we should draw a line and say, this is just for this generation, and forget the generation that has brought us to this point, that won us to Christ, that has discipled us, that has funded the ministry. At no point should we ever do that.
Welcome back. Today I'm talking with worship leader Roy Patterson about styles of worship that can set off what one writer called a worship war. Let's continue the conversation. I know there was a point in a lot of churches, especially some of the starting churches that became mega churches. The original intent was to reach youth.
Yeah.
To reach youth.
Sure.
And there are pastors that I've talked to who have basically said, we're really not interested in the senior citizens, we're interested
I've heard that before
in
too.
the youth. And one church that I'm aware of that disinvited the older traditional members because they said, we don't really fit your style anymore. A lot of the music in church is rock music, heavier music that a lot of people just don't consider reverential music. It's just rock music. And the louder, the faster, the better. And again, maybe this is a dinosaur talking, but there's a lot of us dinosaurs and some not near as old as me who are saying the same thing.
Sure, sure. All right, so I want to make sure I've got your question. First of all, I think reverence starts in the heart. It starts in the heart.
Yeah.
I love God. I want to give him praise and glory for who he is and what he's done. It's not just confined to the music, but music is an integral part of worship. It really, really is. I mean, you look throughout the Psalms and what David did and others did throughout that wonderful book. We want to make sure that we're focused on the Lord. At no point do I believe that we should draw a line and say, this is just for this generation, and forget the generation that has brought us to this point, that won us to Christ, that has discipled us, that has funded the ministry. At no point should we ever do that. I really believe that the Bible is for everybody. I believe that worship is for everybody. And I believe anything that happens in the church ought to be for everybody. Now, there's some music that's not going to appeal to folks that are my age and your age. I was emceeing an event, and some young people got up. They were probably 17, 18, and they did some music like, Jesus, and I had no idea what they were saying, but I was the MC. And so after they were done, I said, okay, come on, let's show them some love. And everybody clapped. They felt like I did. We don't know what you were saying. I said, hey, as long as they're giving Jesus glory, I'm with it. Thank you so much. And we moved on. Was that my preference? No. Yeah. The next song I sang might have been Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Let me flip it a little bit. I love Lecrae. I love AAA, some rappers.
But you blended it.
Yeah.
You blended it to balance it for the entire congregation.
Because I'm a big kid. I'm an adult that's a big kid. And I think that as a pastor, and I'm a pastor at heart, I think we can minister to the whole congregation. Again, it's not either or, it's both and. And as a pastor who I believe is a chief worship leader in every church, I'm going after that whole congregation, and I'm going after your heart. I want you to link up with God. And so the music that we have, it might be skewed this way for right now, but eventually I'm going to skew it back this way. And this music over here might not necessarily fit these people there, but it's all about Jesus. It's all about the body of Christ. And so I think any good leader is going to go after the whole congregation.
The entire philosophy of the church should be to honor Christ and that
Definitely.
music is a part of that,
Right.
but the music is not so important that it just becomes a draw for crowds
Right.
or an entertainment value to pull people in, because I'm not going to mention any church names at all, but I know
Bless
a
you.
couple of places that hired people strictly based on their music ability, and they admitted to me that when they started they were not Christians, but they were incredible with music and could lead a congregation, but there was nothing else there. And these were, I mean, it sounds astounding, but
It is astounding.
but-
On one hand, it is astounding.
yeah,
I think it speaks to a larger issue of, I'm so determined to have a large crowd, I'll do anything. I'll put anybody up front. I'll put on whatever kind of production I need to put on in order to have a large crowd. The reality is this, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men.
Yeah.
If he's not drawing them, I don't think you're going to do a good job of keeping them, even if you do draw them. At the end of the day, we're called to make disciples. That's what we're called to do. And there'll be people that will love the church, there'll be people that will hate the church, people that will see it as a wonderful accessory and a phase that they're involved in. At the end of the day, it's about Christ. And you got to take up your cross and follow him. And so that's when it comes to preaching, when it comes to teaching, when it comes to singing. It's about Christ. Anything beyond that is shabby. And you know what I think? I think it's worldly. I do. I think it's worldly. I think we're tending to measure ourselves by the world instead of by what the Spirit is really saying. We're saying, okay, I know I'm successful because I've got X amount of people at the church. I know I'm successful because my people are giving on this level. I know I'm successful. Well, wait a minute. Nothing wrong with numbers. Don't get me wrong. I would to God that Chicagoland and the millions of people that are here, everybody was saved. Don't get me wrong. But for me to say I'm successful because I've got a lot of people showing up, are they walking away exalting Christ? Are they obeying him? Are they winning other people? That's the litmus test there. Are we making disciples, or are we just drawing large crowds?
Hey, thank you. I've enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed it too. I gotta, have you come back and we'll listen to some hip hop together, something like that.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Just
Okay,
let me know.
I'm gonna let you know. Don't fake me out. I appreciate you, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, the
Thank you
feeling's
so
mutual.
much.
Thank
yeah,
you, boy.
You're
God bless you.
really a pioneer, and you bless so many of us down through the years. I'm grateful.
That's good to know.
I'm grateful for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thanks for being with me.
Glad to be here.
You can hear Roy Patterson of Moody Radio's Urban Praise internet radio station on Saturdays from 6 a.m. till noon, and on Moody Radio's Celebration of Praise on Saturdays, and Music for Sunday. Final thoughts on variety among churches right after this.
But when we start to compare churches to other churches, even if they're in the same town, some really unhealthy things start to happen.
Welcome back. As Roy and I discussed, there's room for a variety of musical styles within the church. Hymns as well as Chris Tomlin's contemporary worship, to even the hip-hop of Lecrae. The most important thing is that the focus is on the Lord Jesus Christ rather than on the worship leader. Music is just as unique as the individuals who create it. Churches are also meant to be unique. Dave Nederhood, Director of Ministry Relations at KFAX Radio in the San Francisco Bay Area, talks more about this in today's Final Thoughts.
Hi, I am thrilled to be able to talk today about one of my favorite subjects, which is that churches are meant to be unique. I have had the opportunity with my job at KFAX to interview a couple hundred pastors now, and it is a joy to be talking to pastors of large churches, little tiny church plants, everything in between, urban, suburban, missional, attraction-based. And I always like to ask pastors, what is your worship service like? I also ask them a little bit about their own journey. What is it meant for you to become a follower of Jesus, and how did you hear that call into ministry? So there's a lot of things that I get to hear about. Pastors each have their own unique thumbprint, and God's made us each unique as individuals. We usually know that. But when we start to compare churches to other churches, even if they're in the same town, some really unhealthy things start to happen. And I call it the McDonaldization or the strip mall version of church. When churches begin to look over their shoulder and do too much comparison, they are not always looking for best practices for, let's say, sharing the gospel, but they start to want to look and feel like the church down the street instead of looking for their own unique stamp of how God's designed them to be a unique community. I think the beauty of Scripture points out very clearly that the church in Ephesus was not like the church in Rome. And both were following Jesus, both had their problems, but they were as uniquely different from each other as they were from the church in Jerusalem or the church in Corinth. And the same should be true of our churches. We should have a distinct taste or flavor or essence in the churches that we visit. I get to see lots of different churches and the work that's going on in them. It's thrilling to me to know that God's called pastors with specific passions. And I think we understand that pretty easily when we think of the role of a pastor should be unique. And as churches grow, unfortunately, sometimes those uniquenesses start to get flattened out. And that's where I think this danger of churches becoming too much like each other starts to occur. So I belong, and my family goes, to a church called Oakland City Church. And it's a beautiful place that God put together about 4 years ago. One pastor is an Australian guy who starts his sermons off with a Dostoevsky quote, and the other is an African-American guy from Richmond who, Pastor Larry, will start his sermons with a gospel rap. Now, they're as different as can be in terms of preachers, but they also put into the DNA of the church that they wanted to be a different place. In fact, the vision statement says, people who don't belong together, gathering around Jesus for the sake of those who don't yet belong. Now, that to me is one of the most exciting mission statements I've ever heard from a church. And they planted themselves right at the heart of the city in a place where the hills and the flats come to meet, and where very different people, different socioeconomics, different politics, different ethnicities, all blend together in this one place that is a picture of the kingdom of God. Now, if you go to a church out in the suburbs, or you go to a church in the inner city, your church might not have the opportunity to be a extremely blended church, and that's okay, but be yourself. And I think God is pleased when He sees the great variety of churches that we have here in the Bay Area and around the world. And one of the things I hope that we do is continue to make the bride of Christ be all that she can be by celebrating her unique differences. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that word. I had the opportunity to spend some time with Dave while I was in San Francisco. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Also enjoyed the time with Roy. You know, worship music today is controversial, the worship music in the church, and everybody has an opinion, has a bias, and I have a bias. And my feeling is that there should be a couple of criteria. One, is it for truly a worship of God or for entertainment? If the worship time is just for entertainment, I think we've missed the goal. The second thing is, are people singing? In a lot of the churches I go to, it's not a participatory thing, it's more of a concert. And if the people in the church are not singing, if it's congregate music, then I think perhaps that's a problem that should be addressed. Well, that controversy will not be settled by the program today, but I do hope you've gotten some good information about it. Thanks for joining us. God bless you. We'll see you the next time on Significant Insights.